When you're 22, broke, and an aspiring artist in Montana, life doesn't offer you many choices. I learned that the hard way. My name is Jenna, and for as long as I can remember, I've been sketching pictures of a life I'll probably never have. One with gallery openings and art critics sipping champagne. Instead, I've been spending my nights sketching on the back of coffee-stained receipts in a tiny, dimly lit apartment, barely scraping by. That's why, when I saw the job listing for an overnight cashier at the Crossroads Gas and Go, I jumped at it. Crossroads Gas and Go wasn't just any gas station. It was infamous among locals. Tucked deep into a deserted stretch of highway, surrounded by endless pines and jagged rocks, the place had a reputation. People swore the pumps never ran dry, even during fuel shortages, and the convenience store was always eerily clean despite its age. But at $50 an hour, I couldn't afford to care about rumors. $50 an hour could cover my rent and still leave enough for art supplies. When I arrived for my first shift, the place looked wrong. Not creepy, just too pristine. Neon lights buzzed softly against the inky sky, casting an unnatural glow on the shiny linoleum inside. The air smelled like gasoline and stale chips, a combination so sharp it made my head spin. The only thing more unsettling than the sterile perfection of the place was the man waiting for me behind the counter. His name tag read, Kevin. He was about 50, gaunt, with hollow eyes and hands that trembled slightly as he shoved a set of keys and a laminated card into my hands. "This is your shift guide," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't lose it." I glanced at the card. On one side were printed instructions about restocking shelves and locking up after hours. On the other side, handwritten in shaky penmanship, were 8 rules. Rule 1, never, under any circumstances, acknowledge customers who arrive at pump 4. Rule 2, if a car pulls up without a driver, lock yourself in the break room for exactly 10 minutes. Rule 3, the cooler door must remain closed at all times after midnight, no matter what you hear inside. Rule 4, the security cameras will glitch at 3:33 a.m. Don't look at the screens. Rule 5, never sell coffee to anyone wearing sunglasses after dark. Rule 6, if someone asks for directions to a place that doesn't exist, give them the map under the register. Rule 7, at 4 a.m., sweep the floor, but avoid the space between aisles 3 and 4. Rule 8, if a customer says they recognize you, no, they don't. Before I could ask Kevin about the rules, he grabbed his coat and left, muttering something about one last warning. As the door slammed shut, the clock behind the counter struck midnight. The first car rolled up to pump 4. The Crossroads Gas and Go felt alive that first night, not in the bustling, comforting way of a coffee shop or even the mechanical whir of a factory. No, this place thrummed with a pulse that seemed to match my heartbeat, a slow, steady thud that echoed in the fluorescent lights, the creak of the counter, and the soft hum of the refrigerator units. I stood behind the counter, nervously drumming my fingers on the laminated rule card. The rules were so specific, so strange, that my brain kept trying to dismiss them as a hazing ritual. Surely Kevin was just messing with me, right? But as the clock on the wall ticked past 12:15 a.m., I realized how quiet the station was. Too quiet. Not a single car had passed, and the only sound was the low hiss of the pump nozzles in the crisp night air. Then, as if summoned by my unease, the soft purr of an engine broke the silence. A sleek black sedan rolled into the lot and stopped at pump 4. My stomach dropped. Rule 1, never, under any circumstances, acknowledge customers who arrive at pump 4. I tried to busy myself, shuffling items behind the counter and restocking cigarettes from the drawer below. But curiosity gnawed at me. The driver hadn't stepped out of the car. In fact, the sedan hadn't even turned off its headlights. The beams glared into the store, illuminating the neat rows of snacks and drinks. I could feel their heat like a spotlight, sharp and unnerving. I stole a glance at the laminated card, hoping for some sort of clarification. There wasn't any, just the blunt warning to ignore pump 4. So I did. Or at least, I tried. The chime above the door jingled suddenly. I froze. My head shot up, heart hammering against my ribs. The sedan was still parked at pump 4, its headlights unwavering. But the store was empty. The door hung open slightly, swaying in the light breeze. "Hello?" I called, voice cracking. I regretted it instantly. The sound of my voice felt wrong here, like I'd disturbed something ancient and sleeping. No one answered. I moved around the counter and toward the door, the warm glow of the sedan's headlights casting long, unsettling shadows on the linoleum floor. I gripped the edge of the door and pulled it shut, locking it firmly. But as I turned back toward the counter, my blood ran cold. A single cup of coffee sat steaming on the counter where there had been none before. A styrofoam cup with the station's logo, its lid cocked slightly to one side. My eyes darted around the store, searching for any sign of movement, but everything was still. Then I saw it. The monitor for the security cameras flickered, the screen snapping from static to sharp black and white footage of the lot outside. In the corner of the frame, standing just beyond the glow of the sedan's headlights, was a figure. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching. Rule 4. Don't look at the screens during glitches. I slammed the monitor off and stumbled back to the counter, heart racing. The coffee cup was gone. The clock struck 1 a.m. I could feel the weight of the rules pressing down on me now, their absurdity drowned out by the undeniable truth that something was wrong with this place. I spent the next hour trying to steady my nerves. The laminated rule card sat on the counter like a mocking challenge, daring me to dismiss what I'd seen. But I couldn't. The coffee cup, the shadowy figure on the monitor, those weren't figments of an overactive imagination. I read the rules again, slower this time, letting the bizarre instructions sink in. Rule 1. Never acknowledge customers at pump 4. Rule 2. Don't step outside after 2 a.m., no matter what you hear. Rule 3. If the bathroom light flickers, knock twice before entering. Rule 4. Don't look at the security monitors during glitches. Rule 5. If you hear whistling, stay behind the counter and don't move. Rule 6. The cleaning closet is off limits after midnight. Lock it if it's open. Rule 7. At 3:33 a.m., place a cup of coffee on the counter and leave it untouched. Rule 8. If a customer mentions the crossroads, tell them the station is closing and lock the doors. These weren't rules. They were traps disguised as guidance. My mind kept circling back to the first one. Pump 4. The sedan had disappeared shortly after 1 a.m., but the unease it left behind lingered. I'd broken eye contact with the security monitors just in time. Hadn't I? Was that enough? At 2 a.m., the silence returned, heavier this time. I tried to distract myself by organizing the candy shelves, aligning rows of brightly colored wrappers. The motion was calming, repetitive, and for a moment, I almost felt normal again. Then, the sound came. A faint whistling, drifting through the air like an old folk tune. My breath hitched. Rule 5. I dropped the candy bars I was holding and bolted back behind the counter, pressing my back against the register. The sound grew louder, more melodic, like it was being carried on a breeze that didn't exist inside the gas station. The chime above the door jingled. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. No one was there. The whistling stopped, replaced by the soft tap of shoes on linoleum. My stomach twisted. The aisles were empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing quietly. But I could hear it, footsteps moving toward the counter, deliberate and slow. "Jenna," a voice said, deep and unfamiliar. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Why don't you come out and say hello?" My name sounded wrong coming from their mouth, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I stayed frozen behind the counter, my knees pulled to my chest. The footsteps stopped inches from where I hid. I didn't dare look up, didn't dare breathe. A long silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerators. "Smart girl," the voice murmured at last, retreating. I heard the chime again, the faint scrape of shoes against asphalt, and then nothing. Just the oppressive quiet. The clock on the wall ticked past 2:30 a.m. I waited another 10 minutes before daring to peek above the counter. The store was empty, as if nothing had happened. But something had. The laminated rule card now had a single smudge of ink at the bottom corner, one that hadn't been there before. I reached for it, hesitating as I noticed the letters rearranging themselves, as though alive. A new rule appeared beneath the others. Rule 9. Don't let them know you're afraid. My hands trembled. This was no hazing ritual. Whatever was happening here was real, and I was in the middle of it. The clock ticked closer to 3 a.m., the station's fluorescent lights flickering slightly as the oppressive silence deepened. I tried to focus on anything but the last hour. The voice, the footsteps, the chilling addition to the rules. But my mind refused to cooperate. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for something to shove me over. I glanced at the rules again. Rule 7 loomed large in my thoughts. At 3:33 a.m., place a cup of coffee on the counter and leave it untouched. It sounded harmless on paper, almost laughable, but after the night's events, I couldn't dismiss it. What would happen if I ignored this simple act? Deciding not to risk it, I brewed a pot of coffee. The bitter aroma filled the air, momentarily masking the eerie stillness of the station. I poured a cup, set it on the counter, and stared at it like it held all the answers. The seconds ticked by as I checked the clock. 3:28 a.m., 5 minutes. 5 agonizingly long minutes. The sound of rustling drew my attention. I turned toward the aisles, expecting to see a customer, but they were empty. Then I heard it again, plastic crinkling, cans clinking. The sound came from the snack aisle, where nothing should have been moving. "Hello?" My voice was barely above a whisper, wavering with fear. I stepped cautiously toward the aisle, my shoes squeaking against the tile. As I turned the corner, my breath hitched. The shelves were in disarray, bags of chips scattered across the floor. And in the middle of the chaos sat a single, unopened can of soda. It rolled toward me, slow and deliberate, as if pushed by an unseen hand. I backed away, my heart pounding. The can stopped at my feet, its label facing up. The word "leave" was scrawled across it in jagged black marker. My stomach twisted as I knelt to pick it up, my hands trembling. The marker's ink was fresh, still wet. The chime above the door rang. I spun around, expecting to see someone or something, but the doorway was empty. The air inside the station felt heavier, colder, as if the temperature had dropped by 10 degrees in an instant. I looked toward the counter and froze. The cup of coffee I'd placed on the counter was steaming violently, far more than it should have been. The vapor curled upward, twisting into shapes that resembled faces, hollow eyes, gaping mouths. I blinked, and they were gone, but the coffee's surface rippled as though disturbed by an invisible hand. The clock struck 3:33 a.m. The station's lights dimmed for a moment, plunging everything into a shadowy gloom. When they flickered back on, the coffee cup was empty. The steam had vanished, leaving behind only a faint, acrid smell that wasn't coffee. A scratching sound drew my attention to the rule card. Another line of text had appeared, etched in sharp, angular letters. "You're almost out of time." The stillness of the station was unbearable, broken only by the faint hum of the neon lights. I sat behind the counter, staring at the rule card as if it could explain itself. My fingers trembled as I traced the fresh text etched into it. "You're almost out of time." "What does that even mean?" I muttered under my breath, my voice the only sound in the hollow space. The clock read 3:45 a.m. The minutes dragged by like hours, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The walls seemed to close in, and the glass doors reflected my face in distorted fragments, as though the station itself was trying to warp reality. I decided to distract myself by cleaning. Grabbing a mop, I pushed it across the floor, the repetitive motion giving me a small sense of control. As the mop water swirled, I noticed something odd. Letters were forming in the bucket, faint and murky, as if written in the oily water. "Ask the drawer." I froze, my grip tightening on the mop. The drawer. The thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. The cash register had an old, locked drawer beneath it, something I'd ignored since starting the shift. The previous cashier had mentioned nothing about it. Compelled by an unexplainable urge, I knelt down and tried to pull the drawer open. Locked. Of course. But beside the register lay a small ring of keys. One of them had to fit. As I sorted through the keys, a faint whisper filled the air. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Then it grew louder, more distinct. A soft voice, almost musical, repeating a single phrase. "Hurry, before it's too late." My hands shook as I found the key that fit. The lock clicked open, and the drawer creaked as I pulled it out. Inside, I found a stack of yellowed papers, brittle with age. Among them was a map of the gas station and its surroundings, but the layout was strange. Rooms were marked that didn't exist, with labels like observation deck and containment zone. My breath quickened as I flipped through the pages, and then I found the list of names. Dozens of them, scrawled in looping handwriting. Some were marked with dates, others with red X's. My stomach turned as I scanned the list and found a name circled in black ink. Jenna Moore, pending. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. How was my name on this list? Who had written it? What did pending mean? Questions swirled in my mind, but no answers came. The whispers grew louder, now coming from every direction. I spun around, expecting to see someone, or something, but the station was empty. The rule card on the counter fluttered slightly, as if stirred by an invisible breeze. I walked back to it, my legs heavy, and picked it up. Another rule had appeared. At 4 a.m., do not look outside, no matter what you hear. The clock read 3:58 a.m. The clock ticked closer to 4 a.m., each second striking like a drumbeat in my chest. The rule card rested heavily in my hand, its words etched into my mind. Do not look outside, no matter what you hear. I wanted to believe this was some elaborate prank, but the whispers, the flickering lights, and my name on that list, all of it weighed on me like an anchor. I backed away from the counter, my eyes flicking to the glass doors. The world outside was a black void, the surrounding trees barely visible under the dim floodlights of the station. And then it began. A faint tapping echoed from the glass. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone knocking politely to be let in. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay put. My hand gripped the edge of the counter as if it could ground me. "Don't look," I whispered to myself, but curiosity clawed at the edges of my resolve. The tapping grew louder, sharper, as if fingernails were raking against the glass. Then came the voice. "Jenna," it called, soft and familiar. My heart sank. It was my mother's voice. "Jenna, honey, it's me. Let me in." Tears welled in my eyes. My mother had passed away years ago. There was no way this was real, and yet her voice was so clear, so full of warmth and affection that it broke me. "Mom?" I whispered, stepping closer to the door despite myself. "Jenna, it's okay," she continued. "I've missed you so much. Just look at me, baby. Just open the door." I stopped mere feet from the glass, the rule card trembling in my hand. I couldn't do it. I couldn't break the rule, but the temptation was unbearable. What if it really was her? What if this place somehow brought her back? The lights in the station flickered violently, casting long, jagged shadows across the room. The voice outside changed. It was no longer soft and soothing. It was distorted, guttural, like a growl wrapped in static. "Jenna," it snarled, "look at me." I stumbled back, tripping over a display rack and crashing to the floor. The sound of tapping turned into pounding, the glass doors rattling as if they would shatter at any moment. I squeezed my eyes shut, clamping my hands over my ears. "You can't hide forever," the voice hissed. "We're waiting." The clock struck 4 a.m. The pounding stopped. Silence filled the air, thick and oppressive. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting the glass to be broken or for something to be standing inside the station. But the doors were intact, and the station was empty. I crawled to my feet, my legs shaking, and glanced at the clock. 4:01 a.m. I had made it. I hadn't broken the rule, but the lingering dread didn't fade. The glass doors were now fogged over, as though something had pressed against them, leaving streaks and smears. The rule card fluttered from the counter, landing at my feet. I picked it up with trembling hands, and a new line had appeared. "You're running out of second chances." The dawn crept in sluggishly, with streaks of gray smearing the horizon. The oppressive darkness outside was finally lifting, but it didn't bring comfort. It felt as though the morning light had no business here, as though the gas station existed in a bubble, impervious to time and reason. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched, though I was alone. I stayed behind the counter, clutching the rule card like a talisman. The store was eerily still. No more flickering lights, no whispers, no voices. It should have felt like relief, but instead, it felt like the eye of a storm. I decided to distract myself, or maybe I was just searching for answers. I opened the employee logbook, flipping through pages filled with mundane notes about inventory and deliveries. But halfway through, the entries became strange. One page simply read, "Don't trust them. Don't trust anyone." The next had frantic scrawls. "They know when you're weak. They smell fear." I turned the page and found something that made my blood run cold. It was a list of names, handwritten in neat looping letters. At the very bottom was my own name, Jenna Wallace. Next to it, a single word, pending. I slammed the book shut, breathing hard. My hands were clammy, trembling as I flipped the rule card over again, hoping for answers. And there it was, a message I hadn't noticed before, faint and scratched into the corner. "Check the back room." The back room. My gut churned at the thought. I'd been avoiding it all night. It was where the previous cashier had slipped me the rules. The door had remained firmly shut, as though daring me to open it. But now, with this cryptic clue in front of me, I felt like I had no choice. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter, its batteries weak, casting only a faint beam, and approached the door. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, each step amplifying the tightness in my chest. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. The rule about the back room came flooding back. Do not enter unless instructed. Well, I was instructed now, wasn't I? I twisted the knob, the door creaking open to reveal a dark, narrow corridor. The air inside was cold and stale, like a tomb. My flashlight flickered, its beam barely cutting through the gloom. At the end of the corridor stood a rusted metal locker, its door slightly ajar. My heart thudded as I approached, the metallic tang of old blood filling my nostrils. I reached out, gripping the edge of the locker door, and pulled it open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, pinned to the back wall of the locker. Each one showed a person standing behind the counter, wearing the gas station uniform. Their faces were slack, their eyes blank, as though they weren't really there. My breath hitched as I scanned the photos. There was the cashier who'd handed me the rules. And then, near the bottom, I saw a photo of myself. I wasn't smiling, wasn't even looking at the camera. I looked vacant, as though I was just an echo. Beneath the photos was an object wrapped in greasy paper. I unwrapped it carefully, my stomach flipping as I revealed a set of keys. They looked ancient, their metal tarnished and cold. The flashlight flickered again, and this time it went out completely. In the pitch-black silence, I heard a voice. Not from outside, not from the radio, but from within the room. "Jenna," it whispered, low and mocking. "You've always been here." Panic clutched my chest like a vice. The whisper of my name still echoed in the oppressive darkness of the back room, a sound that felt too close, too intimate. I stumbled out of the room, clutching the keys as though they might somehow protect me. My flashlight was dead, but faint light filtered through the store's front windows, casting long shadows over the aisles. The air seemed heavier now, like the station was suffocating me. I needed to leave. I needed to get out before whatever this was, whatever they were, consumed me. I darted to the counter, fumbling with the keys in my hand. My mind raced. Why had I grabbed them? What were they even for? I glanced down and noticed something I hadn't before. A small trapdoor behind the counter, its outline barely visible in the worn floorboards. One of the keys in my hand was rusted, its teeth jagged, but its shape matched the trapdoor's lock perfectly. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it, but the other option was staying here, waiting for whatever the gas station had in store for me. So, against every ounce of reason, I knelt and jammed the key into the lock. It turned with an audible click. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air wafting up from below was damp and cold, carrying with it the faint metallic stench of rust. Or was it blood? A sudden noise snapped me from my thoughts. The bell above the station door jangled, signaling someone, or something, had entered. I froze, staring at the open door. But the figure that stood there wasn't human. It was a man-shaped shadow, tall and still, with glowing eyes that pierced the dim light of the store. It didn't move toward me, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching. The rules flooded my mind. Do not acknowledge the ones that don't speak. I clamped my mouth shut, my body trembling as I forced myself to look away. The shadow seemed to glide closer, its presence radiating a cold so intense I could see my breath. It was testing me, daring me to break the rule. I couldn't stay in the store anymore. Without thinking, I turned and plunged down the stairs into the darkness below, pulling the trapdoor shut behind me. The key fell from my hand as I stumbled down the steps, the sound of it clinking against the wood echoing into the abyss. The basement, or whatever it was a maze of narrow corridors, the walls lined with shelves of old, dusty items. Some were normal enough, cans of motor oil, packets of snacks, but others were bizarre. A box of rusted pocket watches, a row of mannequin heads with their faces melted into grotesque shapes, and jars of something murky and alive. The air felt wrong down here, as though time itself had slowed. I heard whispers now, faint and disjointed, carried by a wind that shouldn't exist underground. They called my name, some pleading, some mocking. I stumbled upon a large metal door at the end of one corridor. It looked old, its surface dented and rusted, with a faded sign that read, "Exit." My heart soared. I grabbed the handle and yanked, but it didn't budge. I tried again, throwing my weight against it, but it was like the door was fused to the wall. Then, behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and too heavy to belong to any human. I didn't dare turn around. Instead, I focused on the door, slamming my fists against it, begging it to open. The whispers grew louder, blending with the footsteps. My name echoed from all directions now. Finally, the door gave way, the handle twisting in my grip. I stumbled forward into the cool night air, collapsing onto gravel. I didn't dare look back as I ran, my legs carrying me far from the gas station. I didn't stop running until the sun rose, the light creeping over the horizon like a savior pulling me out of the nightmare. My legs ached, and my throat burned with every gasp of air. But I didn't dare stop until the gas station was miles behind me. When I finally did, collapsing onto the side of an empty stretch of highway, I let out a laugh, a broken, hysterical sound. I was free. Or so I thought. A lone car approached, its engine humming steadily in the quiet dawn. I stood, waving my arms, desperate for help. The car slowed, a beat-up old pickup truck, and the driver rolled down the window. He was an older man, his face weathered and kind. "Need a lift, miss?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I nodded frantically. "Please, I need to get far away from here." He gestured for me to hop in, and I climbed into the passenger seat, my body trembling. As we drove, the man kept glancing at me, his brow furrowed. "You look like you've been through hell," he said finally. "Where'd you come from?" "The gas station. On Route 2, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The man went pale. "That station's been closed for decades," he muttered. "Burned down in '85. They say it's cursed. No one goes near it." My stomach churned. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I was just there. The lights were on, the shelves were stocked, the pumps were working." The man's expression darkened, and he didn't say another word. The rest of the drive was suffocatingly silent, the air thick with unspoken questions and dread. When we reached the next town, he dropped me off at a diner. I thanked him, though the words felt hollow, and stepped inside. The place was bright, filled with the smell of coffee and sizzling bacon. It felt safe, normal. But then I saw them, the customers sitting at the booths. They weren't strangers. They were the same people who had been at the gas station. The woman in the red dress, the man with the limp, the teenager with the hoodie. They all turned to look at me, their faces blank but their eyes burning with recognition. I stumbled back, my heart racing, and nearly crashed into the waitress behind me. She caught me, steadying me with a firm grip. "You okay, honey?" she asked, her voice kind but distant. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I glanced back at the booths, but the customers were gone, the seats empty. I forced a smile, muttered something about needing the bathroom, and fled to the restroom. Inside, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin pale. But something else caught my attention. In the corner of the mirror, faint but unmistakable, was a reflection of the gas station's interior, its flickering neon sign, its dusty shelves, and the counter where I'd stood just hours ago. And behind me, in the reflection, was the shadow of a figure wearing the same uniform I'd left behind. My breath hitched. The mirror fogged up, and in the condensation, words began to appear, written by an unseen hand. "We're waiting." I screamed, stumbling back, and when I blinked, the mirror was clear. But I knew what I'd seen. And as I left the diner, the world outside felt wrong. Too still, too quiet, as though time had paused just for me. I kept moving, kept running, but no matter where I went, the same customers appeared. At gas stations, diners, motels, they were always there, watching, waiting. And now, I can feel it. The pull. The gas station isn't done with me. Maybe it never will be.